My dad slammed the door in my face and shouted, "You're nothing without me, Audra. Don't ever come back." The same night, he wired $56 million into his account from a deal he'd been working on for years. He celebrated with my stepmom and half-siblings, while I stood on the street with a single suitcase. No home, no family, nothing. Before I continue, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the insane twist that shocked everyone in my family's life. I tried calling him, begging him to let me stay just until I figured things out. But he laughed and said, "You'll never be more than a burden. Go survive on your own if you think you're so smart." His words burned inside me. But what he didn't know was that for years I had been building something quietly, something even his millions couldn't buy. When I showed up at my aunt's place that night, she was shocked to see me drenched in rain, holding my torn suitcase. She whispered, "Audra, what did he do this time?" I wanted to break down, but instead I just said, "He'll regret it soon." My aunt looked at me strangely, as if she couldn't tell whether I was broken or planning something. The next morning, while my dad posed for photos with luxury cars and his new mansion keys, I was sitting in a quiet cafe, opening an email that made my hands shake. My secret was no longer just mine, because that email confirmed I had something that could bring my dad to his knees. I didn't sleep that night. My dad's words kept echoing in my head, "You're nothing without me." Every part of me wanted to scream, but instead I stared at that email over and over again. It wasn't just an email. It was confirmation that the tech startup I had been quietly building for the last 3 years was finally bought out by a major Silicon Valley firm. They weren't offering me pennies either. They had wired a multi-million-dollar upfront payment into my account with more installments to come. In that moment, I realized something. While my dad had just made $56 million, I was sitting on a deal that could double that in less than a year. Still, the pain of being thrown out like garbage wouldn't leave me. My aunt made me breakfast and said softly, "Audra, maybe you should forgive him one day. He's still your father." I clenched the fork in my hand and whispered, "He didn't just kick me out, Aunt May. He made sure I felt worthless." My voice cracked, but inside, fire was building. He thought I was weak. He thought I would crawl back to him. He had no idea who I had become. Later that afternoon, I walked past his new mansion. I saw expensive cars lined up outside, guests coming in and out with champagne glasses, and my stepmom showing off jewelry worth more than most people's homes. And there he was, my dad, laughing loud, bragging, telling his friends, "I finally made it. My kids? Well, only the strong ones stay. The weak ones? They're not my problem anymore." His friends chuckled. Some even nodded in agreement. My blood boiled. But instead of going inside and screaming at him, I walked away quietly. I knew something he didn't. While he was flaunting cash, I had power. Real power. My startup's software had already been integrated into several major banks, including the one he used. Without my systems, his flashy new empire would collapse like a house of cards. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I froze. It was my dad's lawyer. His tone was nervous as he said, "Audra, I don't know what you've been working on, but your father's accounts just hit a technical lock. No transfers can go through, and it seems it traces back to your software." I didn't say a word. I just let silence hang until the lawyer stammered, "Your father is panicking. He needs to talk to you." My chest tightened. Just 24 hours earlier, he had thrown me out like trash. Now he needed me. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. But I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Not yet, because if he thought begging once would fix everything, he was about to find out how wrong he was. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, even texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, I ignored them, sipping my coffee like nothing was wrong. But then, one voicemail caught my attention. It was my dad's voice, shaky, desperate, nothing like the proud, arrogant man who had thrown me out. "Audra, please just call me back. They're saying my funds are frozen. The investors are threatening to pull out. I don't know what you did, but..." I need you. Please. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the phone. This was the same man who had told me I was a burden, who laughed when I begged him to let me stay in the house. And now, with his empire cracking, he had nowhere else to turn. By noon, the story was spreading like wildfire. News blogs were buzzing about suspicious financial locks around a sudden millionaire who had just flaunted his wealth. My stepmom's Instagram posts went from showing diamond bracelets to cryptic stories about betrayal and haters. My half-sister, who once mocked me for wearing secondhand clothes, sent me a text that almost made me laugh out loud. Audra, we miss you. Let's talk, miss me? No, they missed my leverage. That evening, my dad finally showed up at my aunt's place. His luxury car was parked outside like a trophy, but the man who stepped out looked broken. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair messy, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He didn't even greet my aunt. He just looked straight at me and said, Audra, we need to fix this. Right now. I leaned back in my chair, calm, collected, and let him speak. He went on about how the deal was falling apart, how the banks were rejecting his transactions, how the investors were threatening lawsuits. Every word was a dagger to his pride. Finally, I asked one simple question. And why exactly should I help you? He froze, his lips trembled. My dad, the man who once thought he owned the world, was speechless. I could see my aunt watching us, shocked, as silence filled the room. Then my dad finally whispered, because without you, I lose everything. For the first time in my life, I felt the power shift completely in my hands. But instead of giving him an answer, I stood up, walked to the door, and said, We'll talk. Tomorrow. And I left him standing there, begging. The following day, the humiliation my father had always feared began unfolding in front of everyone he'd ever wanted to impress. His grand victory party that was supposed to celebrate his $56 million deal had turned into a battlefield of whispers, arguments, and investors demanding answers. I wasn't there at first, but I didn't need to be. The live updates were everywhere. Photos of men in expensive suits storming out of his mansion. Headlines like, Millionaires' accounts frozen overnight, trending online. And even a shaky video on social media showing my father red-faced, yelling at a banker over speakerphone while guests watched. By noon, I got another call, this time from my half-brother. The same brother who once called me the family embarrassment was suddenly soft-spoken. Audra, listen. Dad's losing it. People are saying you're the only one who can unlock this. Can you please come? Everyone's here. I almost said no. But then something inside me whispered, this is it. This is the moment they all see who you really are. So I went. When I walked into the mansion, the room fell silent. My stepmom's eyes widened like she'd just seen a ghost. My half-siblings avoided eye contact, fidgeting with their designer clothes. And then there was my father, sweating, pale, clutching a glass of whiskey that shook in his hand. The investors turned to me instantly. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, asked, Are you Audra? The developer behind the system locking these accounts? I nodded. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. My dad tried to cut in, forcing a smile. She's just my daughter. A little misunderstanding. She'll fix it, right, Audra? His voice cracked, but I didn't answer him. Instead, I looked straight at the investors and said, Yes, I'm the one who designed the software. And no, this isn't a misunderstanding. The locks are automatic security triggers built into the system, ones only I can override. Gasps filled the room. One investor leaned forward, stunned. Wait, you're telling us you built this system? The same one banks are adopting nationwide? I smiled faintly. That's correct. The shock was electric. The same people who once mocked me as useless were now staring at me like I was holding the keys to a kingdom. And I was. My father's face turned red, then pale, then red again. He stammered, Audra, enough of this drama. These are important people. You're making me look bad. I turned slowly to him, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. No, Dad. You did that yourself when you threw me out with nothing. Remember? A hush fell over the room. Every eye was on him. My stepmom's face twisted, trying to hold a smile, but her trembling hands betrayed her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of them. I didn't feel like the underdog. I felt powerful, but I wasn't done yet. I looked around the room, then said, I'll decide if I want to help. But my conditions will come first. If they're not met, your entire empire collapses. The investors leaned in, hungry for my answer. My father clenched his fists, completely trapped, and right then, I knew. The next words out of my mouth would change everything. I let the silence stretch until the tension in the room was so thick you could feel it in your chest. My father's pride was crumbling in front of everyone, and for once he had no way to spin the story. All eyes were locked on me, the daughter he once called worthless, now holding the fate of his empire in her hands. I finally spoke, my voice steady. If you want me to unlock the system, here are my conditions. My father's jaw tightened. Conditions? Audra, this isn't a game. Then you can lose everything. I cut him off, my tone sharp enough to silence even the investors. You threw me out with nothing, remember? So if you want me to fix this, here's the price. I stepped forward, every eye following me. First, you sign over 30% of your company shares to me. Second, you pay Aunt May back every dollar she spent taking care of me when you turned your back. And third, I let my gaze sweep the room, stopping on my stepmom and siblings. You acknowledge in front of every single person here that you were wrong about me. That I was never the burden. You were, gasps echoed. My father's face turned red, then pale, then red again. He looked at the investors for support, but they only stared back coldly. One finally muttered, "Do it. She holds the cards now." The humiliation on his face was priceless. His hands shook as he pulled out a pen and signed the documents the lawyer hurriedly printed. 30% of his empire gone, just like that. My aunt's debt cleared. And then came the hardest part for him. He turned to the room, his voice breaking. I was wrong about my daughter. Audra built something greater than I ever imagined. She isn't a burden. She's the reason I still have anything left. For the first time in my life, my father bowed his head in front of me. The room exploded in murmurs, cameras flashing as people recorded the moment. My stepmom looked like she might faint. My siblings stood frozen, their mouths open in disbelief. I walked past him, calm and collected, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear. You should have thought of that before you kicked me out. With that, I left the mansion, but this time not as the outcast. I left as the woman who had turned humiliation into power, betrayal into triumph. By the next week, headlines weren't about his $56 million deal. They were about me. Daughter's startup outsmarts millionaire father. Audra Johnson, from thrown out to tech powerhouse. The same family that mocked me was now living under my shadow. And the best part? I didn't just win for myself. I won for every person who's ever been told they weren't enough. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about rising so high that they have no choice but to look up at you. And my father? He'll never forget the day he begged for my help, just 24 hours after he kicked me out.